Do you think if atheists believed in God, they would be happier?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why do you think that?
Well, just because, like, both Christians and atheists have to recognize that we're both not perfect, but Christians recognize they have, like, a redeeming quality, that, like, Christ takes that imperfection and sort of, like, makes up for it, makes it, like, okay that we're not perfect, whereas the atheists don't have that.
What do you mean? Atheists can be some of the happiest people on Earth. Let me call up my anti-theist crystal ball of ultimate power and peek in on Viced Rhino. That'll show them.
Virginity is cool. Come on. Virginity is cool. What up? Virginity is cool. He's got virginity is cool.
Okay, maybe not the best example. Let's give that another try. Much better, but surely Mr. Atheist isn't alone. Let's check in on some of the other atheist YouTubers out there. I just wanted to say thank you to all the creators who took part in this video, those dancing and the ones to come. I'll leave links to their channels in the description box below. Please check out their channels, they're great. Now, let's jump into the video.
According to ScienceDaily.com, a person's homosexual preference is not the result of any gay gene, but rather it is the result of an interaction of an individual's biology with environmental and cultural factors. So what does this mean? It means, first of all, that if we single out a person's biology and remove environmental and cultural factors, that this individual will not be homosexual.
So, I noticed you didn't link to the article in your description box, which is pretty funny since you seem to want skepticism unbound, but don't provide links so that your skeptical viewers can go check out the original article. I'll rectify your oversight in mine. Anyone who wants to see the Science Daily article Jacob is referencing can go read it. The first thing you'll notice is the title of the article completely refutes what Jacob is trying to peddle here. It clearly says that homosexual behavior is largely shaped by genetics. Like everything, there is also an environmental aspect, but let's read a bit of what the article has to say. Quote, Dr. Kwasi Raman, study co-author and leading scientist on human sexual orientation, explains, this study puts cold water on any concerns that we are looking for a single gay gene or a single environmental variable which could be used to select out homosexuality. The factors which influence sexual orientation are complex. We are not simply talking about homosexuality here. Heterosexual behavior is also influenced by a mixture of genetic and environmental factors. End quote. Now, this clearly indicates that you can't just isolate one environmental or genetic component and suddenly turn yourself gay or straight. And we see this later in that same article when it says, quote, the study shows that genetic influences are important but modest, and that non-shared environmental factors, which may include factors operating during fetal development, dominate. Importantly, heredity had roughly the same influence as shared environmental factors in women, whereas the latter had no impact on sexual behavior in men. End quote. Unless you're going to invade the womb and somehow try to untangle the incredibly complex way that humans develop, you're not going to stop the gay, Jacob. But I do find it tragically comical that the love thy neighbor crowd often seems to only love thy neighbor when it suits them and their twisted ideology.
So in effect, it is these environmental and cultural factors and their interaction upon a person's biology that causes them to perceive their preference of homosexuality. In essence, homosexuality is a cultural, environmental, and learned behavior.
They told me not to watch too much Bionic Dance.
Much like the behaviors associated with transgenderism. For example, in the American culture, the color blue is often associated with boys, and the color pink is associated with girls. We also have the concept that boys play with cars and girls play with dolls. Now, all of this is based on cultural relativism. For example, in another culture or in another country, playing with dolls may be associated with boy behavior, and the color pink may be associated with boy behavior. So these are all abstract concepts invented by man, which hold no substance in reality.
So I asked fellow YouTuber Luxander to help me out with parts of this video, and they kindly agreed. A link to their channel is in the description box. Take it away, Luxander.
Hey Jacob, may I call you Jacob? So Jacob, you're actually making a pretty good point, and I just kind of wish you would internalize this for some of your other views. Gendered stereotypes and behaviors do change over time and over cultures. Actually, if you look at our own culture in the early 1900s, pink was the boy color and blue was the girl color. I feel like you're so close to grasping that a lot of these gendered expressions are societally imposed, which is weird because later on in this video you swing into biological essentialism. Like you say here that the idea of girls playing with dolls is a culturally ingrained one, man-made, but then later in this video you claim that women are like inherently more caring and better at that than men are. But I guess I'm getting a little ahead of you.
As a theist, I believe that these roles were established by God, both in our DNA and in our culture. Now, perhaps not all of the societal roles given to us by our society are the result of our biological functions. But that goes beyond the point. The point is that there have been established differences between male and female behavior which correlate with their biology. While homosexuality is said to be the result of environmental and cultural factors, we can see that a woman's behavior is actually the opposite of that and the result of their actual biology. So based on those biological differences, the role of a male and female are established. They're established to cater to those differences, generally speaking. Women, for example, have evolved to be more nurturing and caring because they're the children bearers. They're the ones who bring babies into the world. And so according to evolution, they acquired this nurturing and caring behavior. Many women, unlike men, establish a bond with their child.
Well, science disagrees with you, Jacob. Take this article that shows that after a few days, oxytocin levels between a female and male grandparent evened out, which is a hormone associated with maternal bonding. Female and male brains are also remarkably similar, and many of the stereotypical behaviors we normally associate with men and women are found in both men and women. That's not to say that there might not be differences in male and female brains, and we're then stuck with trying to figure out how much of those differences are based on environment as opposed to genetics. But some neuroscientists think that the differences are very small or maybe even non-existent. For example, Lise Elliott, a professor of neuroscience at the Chicago Medical School, said that, quote, male and female brains are not much more different from each other than male or female hearts or kidneys, end quote. And even studies that show general differences between male and female brains admit that if they were to just look at the brain scan or height of someone plucked at random from the study, researchers would be hard-pressed to say whether it came from a man or a woman. That suggests both sexes' brains are far more similar than they are different. But regardless, it's a complex subject, and not one your ancient book of superstition can be relied on to untangle.
Now we can ask, why is any of this important? Well, it's important because if homosexuality is the result of environmental and cultural factors, then it means that our children are at risk. And this is true, especially today when homosexuality is being catered to, when the media is exposing our children to the idea that homosexuality is okay.
Homosexuality is okay. And in what universe is the LGBT community catered to? In 2017, hate crimes that were partially or primarily motivated by anti-LGBT bias nearly doubled. I bet those victims and their families are mighty tired of all that catering and acceptance. All over the world they are shunned, beaten, and killed. Many of the people doing that killing are motivated by silly, outdated, superstitious religious propaganda, and by people like you, Jacob, who sit there smugly behind your computer screen spewing hateful rhetoric. Even in countries normally thought of as being tolerant, like my home country, Canada, have to acknowledge that hate crimes against the LGBT community are staggeringly high and unacceptable. More exposure and education are clearly needed, and videos like yours do a good job of highlighting that fact.
Secondly, given the political climate and our culture, we know, based on the statistics, that those who are homosexual are more likely to commit suicide. So, if our children ever decide to become homosexual, based on cultural and environmental influences, then they're at a higher risk of committing suicide.
Won't someone think of the children? Yes, Jacob, gay kids are more likely to commit suicide than their peers. You go on to say that this may not be because of cultural influences, it might be because of other mental illnesses. You brought up and then immediately brushed aside the one quintessential reason why gay kids are more likely to attempt suicide. If you would do 5 minutes of research, you would find that there is no direct causal link between simply being gay and committing suicide. There is a direct causal link between bullying and suicide, and being kicked out of your house by your parents and suicide. You're perpetuating the kind of belief system that makes kids miserable. And yet you have the gall to bring this to us as though we as the queer community are the problem. Maybe do a quick Google and leave your dead kids at some other doorstep.
Lastly, and most importantly, I believe that it's wrong because it goes against God's will and plan for our life. I mean, it's spelt out in our biological functions. Now, you can't name one elementary or junior high student who doesn't know what the LGBTQ stands for nowadays. I mean, in most places, most kids know what the LGBTQ is.
Eventually.
But the point is that the overexposing of children to these forces, to homosexuality, to what it means, to sex itself, is the sexualization of children. That's why many kids, even when I was growing up, talked about being bisexual at a time when I didn't even care to think about those things.
This is essentially the same argument as people who say like, oh no, all these kids are coming out as trans because of Tumblr. Kids don't turn gay because they learned about it from the internet or at the local mall or whatever it is you said. The access to information allows them to recognize in themselves the things that are reflected in other people. But without those resources, those kids would just go through their lives being confused about who they are. It doesn't make them gay, it just helps them figure it out sooner. Lord have mercy on your future gay kids.
So, guys, tell me, what do you think? What is your perspective on this? Is homosexuality wrong? I believe I made a case to say that it is wrong.
Yeah, a poorly sourced, bigoted, religiously fueled case that doesn't stand up to a moment's scrutiny. Anyhow, that's all I have today. Thanks for watching, take care, and cheers.